Bebeğin, için, vereceğiz, birimizle yatmalısın, dedi, Apaçi, kadınlar. Layla had been walking for hours, though she could not remember exactly how long. The sun had begun to sink toward the horizon, casting long orange and pink streaks across the sky, but the heat of the day still lingered in the dry, dusty air. Her small baby, wrapped tightly in a worn cloth, slept in her arms. Every movement Layla made was careful, gentle, so she wouldn't wake her child. Hunger gnawed at her stomach and her legs ached, but the baby's safety was her only thought. She had left everything behind, her home, her neighbors, and the life she had known, because staying was no longer safe. Every step forward felt heavy, but she knew she could not stop. The village appeared suddenly, tucked into a shallow valley surrounded by low hills. Smoke curled lazily from chimneys, and the faint sound of children laughing reached her ears. Layla paused at the edge, hoping someone might notice her, though she was wary. She had heard stories of villages where strangers were not welcomed. Still, her child was crying softly now, and the urgency of the moment forced her forward. She took a deep breath, smoothed her hair, and walked toward the nearest cluster of houses. As she drew closer, several women noticed her. They were strong, with a presence that commanded respect. Their clothing was colorful but practical, adorned with patterns Layla could not name. Each woman had a quiet authority, a way of moving that suggested they were used to leading and protecting. Layla's heart raced. She did not know if these women would help her or see her as a threat. She stepped forward, hands raised slightly in greeting, trying to show she meant no harm. One of the women, older than the rest and with sharp eyes that seemed to see everything, approached. Layla could feel her gaze measuring her, judging. The woman spoke in a language Layla only partially understood. She shook her head, speaking slowly, pointing to the baby. Layla nodded eagerly, trying to communicate. "My baby, hungry, please," she said, using gestures and simple words. Her voice trembled. The older woman looked at her for a long moment, then motioned for Layla to follow her. Layla felt a mixture of relief and nervousness. Inside the village, life was bustling but orderly. Children ran along narrow dirt paths, their laughter bright against the stillness of the late afternoon. Chickens clucked near small enclosures, and the smell of baking bread drifted through the air. Layla felt a flicker of hope. She had not felt this much safety in days. The older woman led her to a small house at the edge of the village. Inside, the walls were lined with handmade decorations, simple yet beautiful, showing care and tradition. Layla noticed tools for cooking, weaving, and other crafts. Everything spoke of a life rooted in hard work, family, and community. The older woman spoke again, and this time another woman came forward. She was younger, perhaps only a few years older than Layla, but there was kindness in her eyes. She looked at the baby, then back at Layla and nodded slightly. Layla understood that this woman would help her. Relief washed over her in a wave so strong that she almost cried. She handed the baby to the younger woman, who took the child gently, smiling softly. Layla watched her infant's tiny hands move, reaching out without fear. The older woman then gestured for Layla to sit. She sat on a small wooden bench, her heart pounding. The younger woman went to the kitchen area and returned with a small bowl of milk, carefully warmed. Layla watched as the woman held it near the baby's mouth. The infant began to feed, small lips moving quickly, eyes bright with curiosity and hunger. Layla's chest tightened. She had not realized how much she had feared this moment, how much hope had been tied to a stranger's kindness. As the baby drank, Layla looked around the room, noticing small details. There were baskets of herbs, dried flowers hanging from the ceiling, and a soft rug on the floor. The older woman sat opposite her, arms crossed, watching. There was a serious look in her eyes, but it was not unkind. She spoke again, and though Layla could not understand the words, the tone was deliberate, careful. Layla realized the village had rules, customs she had never encountered. It was clear that she would need to be cautious and respectful, even as she accepted their help. Time passed slowly. The baby finished feeding and fell asleep again, resting in the younger woman's arms. Layla's own stomach growled, but she did not dare eat until she was certain it would be allowed. The older woman finally spoke in a tone Layla could just barely understand. "You stay, child safe. You learn." Layla nodded quickly, gratitude and fear mingling in her heart. She was aware that this acceptance came with expectations, though she did not yet know what they might be. That night, Layla slept on a small mat near the fire, wrapped in a warm blanket provided by the village women. The baby slept beside her, breathing softly, completely unaware of the dangers they had faced just hours earlier. Layla thought about her journey, the moments of hunger and fear, and the strange relief she felt now. She had survived so much, but she knew the next days would be challenging. She had entered a world unlike her own, full of rules and customs she did not yet understand. In the quiet of the night, Layla heard the women talking outside, voices low and serious. She could not make out the words, but the tone suggested discussion and careful planning. She realized that she was being observed, that her actions and words mattered. At first, the thought was frightening, but then she remembered the kindness she had seen. Perhaps, she thought, understanding and patience could be her path forward. By dawn, Layla was awake again. The baby stirred, and the younger woman was already preparing a small meal. Layla tried to speak, asking questions about the village, the customs, and how she could repay their kindness. The women responded in gestures and simple words, teaching her slowly, carefully. Layla understood that this was a place of balance, where respect, patience, and understanding were valued as much as survival. As the morning sun rose higher, Layla stepped outside the small house for the first time that day. She looked at the village fully, seeing the children playing, the women working, the men tending to the fields. There was a rhythm here, a quiet order that she had not expected. She realized that her child would be safe here, that she had a chance to rest and regain strength. But she also knew that integration into this community would not be easy. She would need to learn, adapt, and prove herself, all while caring for her baby in this new environment. That day, Layla took her first steps toward understanding the village. She helped carry water from the well, watched the women work with fabrics and tools, and listened intently to every word she could catch. The older woman observed silently but nodded at her efforts, a small sign of approval. Layla felt a sense of hope, mingled with caution. She understood that survival was only the first step. Learning to live with respect and understanding was the next. Evening came again, and Layla and her baby sat near the fire once more. She watched as the younger woman played softly with the child, singing a gentle tune. Layla felt a small, fragile peace. For the first time in days, she allowed herself to believe that they might have a future here, a future where her child could grow, safe and nurtured, and where she could rebuild some part of the life they had lost. Layla closed her eyes that night, holding her baby close. She thought of the long road ahead, the lessons she would need to learn, and the trust she would need to earn. But she also thought of the kindness she had already encountered, and the possibility that even in a world that could be harsh and unforgiving, compassion still existed. And with that thought, she drifted into a deep, exhausted sleep, ready to face the challenges of the next day. The morning light spilled gently over the village, casting long shadows from the small houses and trees. Layla awoke to the soft cooing of birds and the faint scent of fresh bread baking in one of the communal ovens. Her baby stirred beside her, yawning and stretching tiny arms, and Layla smiled despite her tiredness. The previous day had been overwhelming, but there was a small spark of hope inside her. Perhaps this village, so strange and new, could provide the safety her child desperately needed. The younger woman, Amina, was already awake. She had prepared a small bowl of porridge and milk for the baby, who began eating with delight. Layla watched quietly, absorbing every movement, every expression. Amina spoke softly, pointing to the bowl, then to Layla, encouraging her to eat something as well. Layla hesitated, unsure if she was allowed, but hunger won over caution. She took a small portion of bread and sipped warm water, grateful for even this small kindness. After breakfast, the older woman approached Layla. Her face was serious, her posture firm. She motioned for Layla to follow her outside. Layla obeyed, clutching her baby tightly. As they walked, she noticed the villagers starting their daily routines. Men tending to the fields, women carrying baskets of fruit, children laughing as they ran through the narrow paths. Life in this village moved with a rhythm Layla had never seen before, a rhythm that was strict yet harmonious. The older woman led Layla to a shaded area near a small stream. There, several women sat together, working on weaving fabrics and preparing herbs. The older woman gestured toward them, then toward Layla. Layla understood immediately. She was being introduced, being shown the ways of the village. Each woman looked at her carefully, assessing her. Layla lowered her gaze respectfully, not wanting to offend. She realized that every gesture mattered here, that respect and patience were valued above all. One of the women, slightly younger than the older woman but with a warm smile, approached Layla. She introduced herself as Miriam, though Layla only understood the name by sound. Miriam gestured for Layla to sit beside her and began to show her how to weave small pieces of fabric. At first, Layla fumbled, her fingers clumsy and unpracticed. But Miriam was patient, demonstrating each step slowly, repeating movements until Layla began to understand. As Layla worked, she felt a sense of focus and purpose she had not felt in days. While Layla concentrated on weaving, Amina stayed close to her baby. The infant gurgled happily, reaching out for the small, colorful threads in Layla's hands. Layla laughed softly, the sound unfamiliar but comforting. For a brief moment, the weight of her journey felt lighter. She realized that in this village, small acts of learning and cooperation were valued just as much as survival. Every movement, every effort was part of a larger harmony, and she was beginning to understand her place within it. As the day progressed, the older woman returned. She spoke in a tone that was firm but not unkind, pointing toward the fields and the animals. Layla understood that she was being invited, or perhaps expected, to help with other tasks. She hesitated, unsure of her strength or ability, but the villagers did not wait for answers. They moved together with purpose, showing Layla how to fetch water from the stream, how to feed chickens, and how to tend to small vegetable patches. Layla worked alongside them, her hands blistered and her back aching, yet a quiet pride grew within her. She was contributing, learning, and slowly becoming part of the rhythm of village life. Midday came with a blazing sun overhead. Layla and the women paused in the shade for a short meal. Bread, fresh herbs, and a small piece of cheese were shared among them. Layla ate quietly, observing the women as they spoke in their native tongue. Though she could not understand the words, she noticed the way they listened to each other, laughed, and worked together. There was a strong sense of community here, a bond that seemed unbreakable. Layla felt both admiration and a little fear. She was an outsider, and yet she was being allowed to join in, cautiously, step by step. After the meal, Layla returned to the weaving area. Miriam handed her a small bundle of threads and encouraged her to continue. Layla's fingers moved more confidently now, her mind calmer. As she worked, she thought about the journey that had brought her here. She had been scared, hungry, and alone, but the kindness of strangers had opened a door for her. She knew that she could not take this gift lightly. The baby in her arms depended on her, and the trust of these women would require respect, patience, and humility. Later, as the afternoon sun began to dip, the older woman approached Layla again. This time she spoke with gestures that Layla began to understand. The women were offering help for her child, but they expected something in return, not in a harsh or cruel way, but in a way that respected their traditions. Layla listened carefully, realizing that understanding their customs was part of the agreement. She did not feel threatened, but rather aware that this was a delicate negotiation between her needs and the rules of the community. Amina, sensing Layla's hesitation, took her aside. She explained slowly, using gestures, facial expressions, and simple words that Layla could understand. The village had customs that outsiders often struggled with, but if Layla could participate in small ways, her baby would continue to receive care and protection. Layla nodded, grateful for the patience Amina showed her. She realized that survival here was not just about food or shelter. It was about learning, adapting, and respecting the ways of others. As evening approached, the village prepared for the night. Fires were lit outside, and the smell of cooking food filled the air. Children played quietly near the edges of the homes, and the adults spoke in soft tones. Layla helped as best she could, carrying small bundles of firewood and arranging mats near the central fire. Her baby, now full and sleepy, rested safely in Amina's arms. Layla felt a strange sense of calm. For the first time in a long while, she did not feel completely alone. That night, the older woman invited Layla to sit beside her near the fire. She spoke slowly, pointing to the baby and then to Layla, repeating gestures that meant understanding, learning, and respect. Layla listened, absorbing every detail, knowing that her actions in the coming days would shape her and her child's place in the village. She realized that the women were not cruel. They were cautious, protective of their traditions, and testing her willingness to respect them. Layla spent the rest of the night thinking about the day. She reflected on the weaving lessons, the tasks in the fields, the small meals shared with the women, and the careful way they had shown her the rules of the village. She understood that she had been offered a chance not everyone received. With this opportunity came responsibility. Her child's safety and well-being depended not just on the food and shelter, but on her ability to understand, adapt, and earn the trust of these women. When she finally lay down to sleep, Layla held her baby close and whispered a silent promise. She would do everything she could to protect and nurture her child. She would learn the ways of the village, follow their guidance, and respect their customs. The journey ahead would not be easy, but she had already survived so much. If she could navigate this new life with patience and care, perhaps there was hope for a brighter future, not just for her baby, but for herself as well. Layla drifted off to sleep that night with a sense of cautious hope. She knew the days ahead would be full of challenges, lessons, and moments of uncertainty. But she also knew that this village, these strong, careful, and kind women, had given her and her child a chance. And for Layla, that chance was everything. The following morning, Layla awoke to the soft sounds of the village stirring to life. Sunlight filtered through the small window of the room she was allowed to stay in, creating warm, golden patterns on the floor. Her baby, now more alert than the previous days, cooed and reached for her fingers. Layla smiled tiredly, brushing the hair from her face, feeling the weight of exhaustion, but also a quiet determination. She had survived so much already, but she knew that the next challenge was understanding the delicate balance of life in this village and proving that she could be trusted. Amina arrived shortly after dawn, carrying a small basket of fresh bread and fruit. She handed some to Layla, who accepted it with gratitude, though she hesitated, aware that every action here was observed and evaluated. Amina smiled, sensing her hesitation, and guided her toward the main courtyard, where several women were gathering. Layla could feel the tension in her chest. The knowledge that she was still an outsider, someone being cautiously measured, was difficult to shake. She reminded herself that patience and humility would be her allies. The older woman who had first welcomed her approached Layla with a serious expression. She gestured toward the field, pointing to small bundles of grain and the animals that grazed nearby. Layla understood that she was expected to work, to contribute, and to learn quickly. Her heart sank slightly at the thought of manual labor. Her muscles ached from the previous day, but she pushed the fear aside. Survival and acceptance required effort. She followed the older woman, baby safely in her arms, to the edge of the fields where the day's work awaited. Layla began by helping with simple tasks. She gathered small bundles of herbs, learning to recognize the ones used for cooking and those meant for medicinal purposes. Miriam showed her how to sort and clean the grains, explaining through gestures and repetition which ones were suitable and which were not. Layla's hands were clumsy at first, dropping seeds and misplacing bundles, but Miriam's patience never wavered. Step by step, Layla began to feel a sense of accomplishment. Each small success built her confidence, though she remained aware that she was constantly being watched and evaluated by the older women. While she worked, Layla observed the village more closely. Life here was orderly yet full of warmth. The children laughed as they ran along the dirt paths, carrying small containers of water or helping their parents tend the animals. The women moved with grace and efficiency, working together without unnecessary words, but with a clear understanding of each other's intentions. The men tended the fields and livestock, speaking rarely, but their eyes betrayed a quiet pride in the way the village operated. Layla realized that every action had meaning, every gesture mattered. She had entered a world where cooperation and understanding were as important as survival itself. As the sun climbed higher, Layla felt the strain of her efforts. Her muscles ached, her stomach reminded her she had not eaten enough, and the baby grew restless in her arms. She looked around, unsure how to continue, when Amina came to her side. The younger woman smiled warmly and gestured toward a small patch of shade under a tree. Layla followed, placing the baby carefully on a soft blanket. Amina handed her a small portion of bread and water, encouraging her to eat while keeping a watchful eye on the child. Layla felt a surge of gratitude. Amina's kindness was gentle but firm, guiding her without patronizing, helping her understand how to navigate this unfamiliar world. During the brief rest, Layla's thoughts wandered to the offer the older woman had made the previous day. She understood now that there was an unspoken expectation to participate in the community's customs and ways of life. The women were not cruel, they were protective, careful to preserve their traditions and cautious in allowing outsiders into their circle. Yet the thought of being judged, of needing to adapt to ways she did not fully understand, weighed heavily on her. She wondered if she would ever be able to balance her own morals and instincts with the demands of the village. After the break, Layla returned to work, this time assisting with the animals. She learned how to feed the chickens, check the goats, and ensure that the water troughs were clean. At first, she was clumsy, startling the animals and dropping feed, but the women guided her patiently. One of the older women placed a hand on her shoulder, nodding slightly when Layla corrected a mistake on her own. It was a small gesture, but it carried immense weight. It was the first sign that her efforts were being recognized, that her willingness to learn and respect their rules mattered more than her mistakes. Midday arrived with the sun blazing overhead. Layla joined the women under a large tree for a meal. Bread, fresh vegetables, and a small amount of cheese were shared among them. The women ate slowly, carefully, and Layla observed every detail. She noticed the way they gave priority to elders, how they spoke with subtle gestures and nods, and how even small acts of cooperation were appreciated. Though she could not understand all the words, she began to grasp the deeper meanings behind their actions. She realized that acceptance in this village would not come from grand gestures but from consistent, thoughtful participation. After the meal, Layla continued learning. Miriam introduced her to the basics of cooking over the fire, showing her how to prepare simple meals with the ingredients available. Layla watched carefully, imitating each movement, and soon she was able to complete small tasks on her own. The older woman observed silently, occasionally offering guidance or correction. Layla felt the weight of responsibility, but also a growing sense of pride. She was learning not only skills, but also the unspoken language of respect and cooperation that governed the village. As afternoon approached, Layla noticed that the baby was becoming fussy. Amina took the child in her arms, singing softly in a language Layla could barely understand, but the tone was comforting. Layla felt a pang of emotion. She realized that her child was safe here, nurtured and cared for, even as she herself struggled to navigate the village's customs. The experience gave her both hope and determination. She knew that learning, adapting, and respecting the rules of the community were not just about her survival, they were essential for her child's well-being. Late in the afternoon, the older woman called Layla aside. She spoke slowly, using gestures and simple words, explaining that the community valued honesty, patience, and respect above all. Every action, no matter how small, was observed and had meaning. Layla listened intently, absorbing every detail, knowing that her future in the village depended on her ability to understand and follow these principles. She nodded repeatedly, determined to prove her sincerity and dedication. The day ended with a communal gathering near the central fire. Women and children sat together, weaving, telling stories, and sharing small tasks. Layla joined hesitantly, contributing where she could. She was clumsy at first, but Miriam guided her gently, correcting mistakes without judgment. Slowly, Layla began to feel a sense of belonging, not complete, but a fragile thread connecting her to this community. She understood that trust and acceptance were not granted quickly. They had to be earned through consistent effort and respect. As night fell, Layla and her baby were allowed to rest. She held the infant close, reflecting on the day's experiences. She had learned more than just skills. She had learned patience, observation, and the subtle ways that respect was shown in this village. She realized that her own instincts and values could coexist with the community's rules if she approached each situation with care and understanding. The thought gave her hope, even as she felt the weight of responsibility pressing down on her shoulders. Before sleep claimed her, Layla made a silent promise to herself and to her child. She would continue to learn, to adapt, and to respect the village's ways. She would work diligently, contribute meaningfully, and prove through her actions that she was worthy of the trust and kindness extended to her. The road ahead would be long and difficult, but she felt the first stirrings of confidence. For the first time in weeks, she allowed herself a small measure of hope that she and her baby could not only survive but thrive in this new environment. As the stars appeared in the sky, Layla drifted into a deep, exhausted sleep, her baby curled safely in her arms. The village outside was quiet, yet alive with the soft sounds of life continuing in its steady rhythm. Layla understood that tomorrow would bring new challenges, new lessons, and new opportunities to earn trust and acceptance. But she also understood that she was not alone, and that realization gave her courage she had not felt in a long time. The next morning, Layla awoke with a mixture of anticipation and nervousness. Overnight, she had thought about the lessons of the previous days, the subtle ways the women of the village had observed her, and the unspoken expectations that had been placed upon her. Her baby was sleeping peacefully beside her, and for a moment, Layla allowed herself to feel a quiet sense of relief. She had made it this far, but she knew that the day ahead would test her patience, adaptability, and understanding of the village in ways she had not yet encountered. Amina arrived promptly, carrying a small bundle of bread and fruit. She gestured for Layla to follow her, leading her to the central courtyard where several women were already gathered. Layla noticed the older woman sitting in the shade, her expression serious but not unkind. She understood that this day would involve more than just work. It would involve deeper understanding, negotiation, and perhaps compromise. As Layla approached, the older woman gestured for her to sit. Layla obeyed, feeling both cautious and curious. The older woman began speaking, using slow gestures and careful words that Layla tried to follow. The message was clear. The village had traditions that had been followed for generations, and outsiders were expected to respect these customs. There were tasks and responsibilities, yes, but also behaviors, gestures, and rituals that communicated respect, trust, and sincerity. Layla listened intently, determined to understand, even though the full meaning of every word was still just beyond her comprehension. Amina stayed close to Layla, providing gentle guidance. She explained certain customs in simpler terms, using gestures and repetition to make sure Layla could follow. Layla realized that this day would be about learning not just physical skills, but also the subtler ways of communicating and connecting with the community. It was a delicate dance, one in which missteps could lead to confusion or even mistrust, and she felt a quiet tension building in her chest. The day began with tasks in the fields. Layla helped harvest vegetables, water plants, and carry baskets of produce. She noticed that every action had significance: how one carried a basket, the care taken in handling the plants, and the attentiveness shown to others all communicated respect and awareness. Layla moved carefully, imitating the gestures of the women around her. Mistakes were corrected gently, and slowly she began to internalize the rhythm and flow of their movements. She felt a growing sense of accomplishment as her work became smoother and more confident. Mid-morning, the older woman brought Layla aside and spoke with a slightly firmer tone. She gestured toward the baby, then toward Layla, and finally toward the women working nearby. Layla understood that the village's offer to care for her child was tied to her willingness to participate fully in the community's customs. It was not cruel, but it was strict. The women were willing to help, but they needed to know that Layla was committed to learning, respecting, and honoring their ways. Layla felt the weight of responsibility press upon her, but she also felt a renewed determination. Her child's safety and well-being depended on her actions, and she would do whatever it took to ensure both. Amina guided Layla back to the weaving area, where she was asked to continue learning a more complex pattern. Layla struggled at first, her fingers fumbling, but Miriam remained patient. Step by step, Layla began to grasp the sequence of movements, the careful crossing of threads, and the meaning behind the colors and designs. It was a lesson in focus, patience, and understanding, and Layla realized that the weaving was more than a task. It was a way to connect, to show respect, and to demonstrate her willingness to be part of the village. While Layla focused on weaving, Amina took the baby nearby. She sang softly, and though Layla could not understand the words, the tone was gentle and soothing. Layla watched, feeling a wave of gratitude. Her child was not only safe but nurtured, experiencing care from someone who understood the village's traditions. For Layla, this reinforced the importance of learning and respecting the customs. She could not rely solely on survival instincts. She needed to embrace the culture, even in small ways, to secure the future of her child. As the afternoon sun climbed high, the older woman introduced Layla to a small ritual performed before meals. She explained, through gestures and demonstrations, how the act symbolized gratitude, respect, and unity within the community. Layla watched carefully, repeating each movement as best she could. She felt clumsy at first, but the women guided her gently. With each step, she began to feel a subtle connection forming between herself and the community, a bridge built through patience, respect, and shared effort. By late afternoon, Layla was allowed to help with a larger task, preparing a communal meal. She worked alongside several women, chopping vegetables, stirring pots, and arranging simple dishes for everyone to share. Each movement required care, and every gesture carried meaning. Layla understood that this was more than just cooking. It was a demonstration of her commitment to learning and participating in the village's life. She felt a sense of pride and accomplishment as her contributions were acknowledged with small nods and approving glances. Throughout the day, Layla noticed subtle changes in how the women interacted with her. Their expressions softened, their gestures became more welcoming, and small smiles appeared when she completed a task correctly. It was not immediate acceptance, but it was a sign that her efforts were being recognized. Layla understood that trust and respect were earned gradually, through consistent, sincere actions. She felt a mixture of relief and determination, knowing that her patience and diligence were beginning to yield results. As evening approached, the villagers gathered near the central fire for a time of reflection and storytelling. Layla sat quietly, observing the interactions. Children listened attentively, women shared experiences, and elders offered guidance. Layla felt the warmth of community, even as she remained aware of her status as an outsider. She realized that integration was not about imposing her own ways, but about understanding, participating, and contributing meaningfully. Her child, asleep beside her, was already part of this shared rhythm, nurtured and protected by the women who had welcomed them. Before nightfall, the older woman approached Layla once more. She spoke slowly, gesturing toward the baby and then toward Layla. Layla understood that the women were offering her an opportunity for compromise. Instead of expecting her to follow every tradition perfectly at once, they allowed her to learn gradually, participating in ways that respected both her boundaries and the community's customs. Layla felt a profound sense of gratitude. She realized that this offer was a gift of trust, and she would honor it with her actions. That night, Layla held her baby close and reflected on the day. She had learned more than just practical skills. She had learned patience, observation, and the subtle ways in which respect and trust were communicated. She understood that survival here depended on more than food and shelter. It required careful attention, humility, and a willingness to embrace the community's values. For the first time since her journey began, Layla felt a sense of belonging, not complete but fragile and promising. As she drifted off to sleep, Layla made a quiet promise to herself and to her child. She would continue to learn, to adapt, and to respect the village's customs. She would contribute sincerely, communicate carefully, and demonstrate her commitment through action rather than words alone. The road ahead would be long and challenging, but she felt a renewed determination. For the first time in many weeks, Layla allowed herself to believe that her child could grow up safe, nurtured, and even happy in this unfamiliar place. Outside, the village settled into the calm of night. Fires burned softly, casting gentle light across the small homes. Children slept, women whispered among themselves, and the rhythm of the community continued steadily. Layla closed her eyes, listening to the subtle sounds of life around her, feeling a sense of cautious hope. She knew that tomorrow would bring new challenges, but she was ready to face them, with patience, understanding, and the growing support of the women who had begun to accept her. In the quiet moments before sleep, Layla reflected on the lessons of the day. She had learned that survival was only the beginning, and that true safety and belonging required understanding, respect, and effort. She thought about the women's offer, the subtle ways they had guided her, and the small gestures that had begun to form a bridge between herself and the community. She understood that acceptance was not a gift to be taken lightly, but a responsibility to be honored through consistent, sincere actions. With her baby sleeping peacefully in her arms, Layla felt a fragile but growing sense of peace. She had entered this village as a stranger, scared and uncertain, but she was learning to navigate its customs, contribute meaningfully, and build trust. Each small success, each careful gesture, was a step toward integration, and toward ensuring a safe, hopeful future for her child. And with that thought, she finally allowed herself to rest, ready to face the challenges of the next day with courage and determination. The morning sun rose gently over the village, casting long golden beams across the rooftops and fields. Layla awoke with a sense of calm she had not felt for weeks. Her baby stirred beside her, stretching tiny arms and opening bright, curious eyes. For the first time, Layla felt that perhaps, just perhaps, they had found a place where they could survive, and maybe even thrive. She took a deep breath, steadying herself for the day ahead. Today felt different. It felt like a day where progress could truly take root, where understanding and trust might finally blossom into something lasting. Amina arrived soon after dawn, carrying a small basket filled with bread, fruit, and fresh herbs. She gestured for Layla to follow her to the central courtyard, where the other women were already busy with their morning routines. Layla noticed the older woman watching her closely, but there was a subtle softness in her gaze now that had not been there before. The quiet observation that had once made Layla anxious now felt like guidance and cautious encouragement. She understood that she had earned a small measure of trust, and she felt proud, yet determined to continue proving herself. The day began with chores in the fields. Layla helped gather vegetables, water plants, and feed the animals. Her movements were no longer clumsy. She moved with a careful confidence, remembering the lessons of the previous days. The women worked alongside her, offering gentle corrections when needed, but there was a sense of acknowledgement in their nods and smiles. Layla realized that she was no longer simply an observer or an outsider. She was becoming a participant in the rhythm of the village, part of its daily life, however tentative that connection might still be. While she worked, Layla thought about the journey that had brought her here. She had traveled through uncertainty, fear, and exhaustion, driven by her desire to protect her child. Each day in the village had been a lesson, not just in skills and survival, but in patience, understanding, and respect. She remembered the first moment she had arrived, the anxiety she had felt, and the cautious way the women had approached her. It was almost unbelievable to her now that she had come so far in such a short time, learning to navigate customs and traditions she had once found foreign and intimidating. Mid-morning, the older woman approached Layla with a small bundle of fabric and threads. She gestured for Layla to sit, then began to show her a new weaving pattern, more intricate than anything she had attempted before. Layla's fingers trembled slightly as she took the threads, but Miriam came to her side, guiding her patiently. Step by step, Layla began to understand the sequence, the crossing of threads, and the symbolic meaning behind the colors. This weaving was more than a craft. It was a way to communicate respect, understanding, and connection with the community. Each movement carried intention, and Layla felt a quiet sense of accomplishment as her progress was noticed and acknowledged. By midday, Layla was invited to assist with preparing the communal meal. She chopped vegetables, stirred pots, and carefully arranged simple dishes for everyone. The women worked seamlessly together, demonstrating the value of cooperation, patience, and mutual respect. Layla observed and learned, noting the small gestures that carried great meaning. The way a nod acknowledged a task completed well, the way hands were offered to help without words, the subtle rhythms of shared work. She realized that this was the essence of the village, not just survival, but community, trust, and mutual care. While Layla worked, Amina took the baby and sat nearby, singing softly in a language Layla did not understand but found comforting nonetheless. The infant giggled and reached out toward the vibrant fabrics and dishes around her. Layla's chest tightened with emotion. Her child was safe, fed, and cared for, not just by her own hands, but by a network of women who had once been strangers. She felt a profound sense of gratitude and relief. It was in this moment that Layla realized the true gift of the village. It was not merely survival, but belonging, guidance, and the slow building of trust and connection. In the afternoon, The older woman brought Layla aside for a quiet conversation. She spoke with gestures and slow words, explaining that the village had seen her dedication and sincerity. They were offering her a chance to participate more fully in their customs, not as a requirement to earn care for her child, but as an opportunity to integrate more deeply into the life of the community. Layla listened carefully, her heart swelling with a mix of relief and pride. She understood that the offer reflected trust, a gift she would honor with consistent effort, respect, and care. The later part of the afternoon was spent on learning subtle cultural rituals. The older woman demonstrated movements and gestures that symbolized respect, gratitude, and unity within the community. Layla practiced repeatedly, at first awkwardly, then with increasing confidence. Miriam and Amina guided her patiently, correcting mistakes with gentle smiles and encouraging nods. Each small success strengthened Layla's connection to the village, helping her feel that she was no longer entirely an outsider, but someone beginning to understand, participate, and contribute. Evening approached with a sense of calm and completion. The women and children gathered near the central fire, sharing stories, songs, and laughter. Layla sat quietly, observing and participating where she could. Her baby slept peacefully, cradled in Amina's arms, and Layla felt a quiet pride. She had come a long way. Each day of learning, adapting, and respecting the customs had brought her closer to safety, understanding, and belonging. The rhythm of the village life had begun to resonate within her own heart, giving her a sense of purpose and hope she had not felt in months. Before nightfall, Layla was invited to sit with the older woman by the fire. She had learned to understand small gestures, subtle nods, and the meaning behind unspoken expressions. The older woman gestured toward the baby, then toward Layla, and finally toward the group gathered around them. Layla understood that she had earned not just a place in the village, but the respect and trust of its members. It was a quiet, powerful moment, a recognition of her sincerity, patience, and commitment to learning. That night, as Layla lay beside her sleeping child, she reflected on the journey that had brought her here. She had faced uncertainty, fear, and exhaustion, but she had also encountered kindness, patience, and understanding. She realized that survival had always been more than finding food and shelter. It was about connection, trust, and the willingness to adapt and grow. She thought of the women who had guided her, the lessons she had learned, and the baby who was safe, nurtured, and thriving despite all the challenges they had faced. Layla felt a quiet sense of accomplishment and hope. She knew that the days ahead would still bring challenges and learning, but she also understood that she had already achieved something remarkable. She had navigated a new culture, gained the trust of the village women, and ensured the safety and care of her child. She was no longer entirely an outsider. She was part of a community, connected through mutual respect, effort, and understanding. As the stars appeared in the night sky, Layla whispered a quiet promise to her child. She would continue to learn, grow, and participate in the life of the village. She would honor the trust that had been placed in her, respecting the customs and values of the community while caring for the child she loved more than anything. She knew that her journey was far from over, but she felt prepared, equipped with patience, understanding, and a renewed sense of purpose. The village settled into the calm of night. Fires burned softly, casting gentle light across the small homes and paths. Children slept, women whispered softly to each other, and the rhythm of the community continued steadily. Layla closed her eyes, listening to the sounds around her. The gentle murmurs, the crackle of the fire, the occasional soft laugh, and felt a sense of belonging she had never known before. It was fragile and new, but it was real, and it gave her courage and hope. Layla drifted into sleep, her baby resting safely in her arms. She dreamt of a future where her child could grow up nurtured and secure, surrounded by people who, though different from her, had shown that kindness, trust, and understanding could create a home even in the most unexpected of places. She awoke the next morning ready to continue learning, participating, and honoring the trust she had earned. She understood that this was more than survival. It was the beginning of a life built on respect, empathy, and community. In the quiet of the early morning, Layla reflected once more on her journey. She had traveled through uncertainty and fear, yet she had arrived in a place of safety and possibility. She had learned that trust was earned through patience and sincerity, that understanding a new culture required careful observation, and that her actions mattered not just for her own survival, but for the well-being of her child. She knew that the days ahead would continue to teach her lessons, challenge her patience, and test her resolve. But she also knew that she was not alone, and that this community had begun to welcome her with cautious but genuine acceptance. With her baby in her arms, Layla stepped outside to greet the new day. The village stretched before her, alive with movement, laughter, and purpose. She felt a sense of pride, hope, and determination that was stronger than ever. No matter what challenges lay ahead, she knew that she had found a place where she could belong, learn, and grow. And with that knowledge, she took her first steps into the day, ready to face whatever it might bring with courage, patience, and unwavering love for her child.